Hey Helga. My name is Phil Brakander, and I'm here today with Helga Christoffersen, curator of AKG Nordic Art and Culture Initiative in Buffalo, upstate New York. So, nice to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And for those who are not familiar with the AKG Nordic Art and Culture Initiative, could you please explain what this is and how it came about to be?
Of course. It's the story is sort of rather long, so I'll try to give the very short version of it. The Albright Knox Gallery is this is the fifth oldest museum in the US and the first museum to ever look at the art of its time. It was founded in 1862. Currently, the museum is closed and is undergoing a large expansion, building a very large new building and reopening in the end of next year. As part of this process, the curatorial team is also expanding the scope of the program, meaning the shows done, everything a museum does is growing exponentially. And Janne Siren, who is the museum's director and my lovely boss, at some point in this process, they all ask themselves, what should also grow as part of the museum expanding? Which new programs should come, and in addition to the existing program of exhibitions. And so, for multiple reasons, this led to a focus on Nordic contemporary art. So this is an initiative that the museum is starting, that I am now spearheading. So it's a programmatic and curatorial focus on this region of the world, and it's not sort of yet begun, but it is launching after the museum reopens, and will also run for the next 60 years, which is sort of quite a long time scope of an effort like this. But you could compare it to many other efforts that other North American museums are undertaking. MoMA has since almost 2 decades looked very closely at South America. The Guggenheim looks very much to Asia, and so forth. The Albright Knox is now adding a curatorial focus that really sort of is an addition to the landscape of how museums in North America is already looking globally at contemporary artistic practice.
And how come the museum is based in Buffalo?
That's where it was founded. I mean, it's in a way you can ask that about any museum.
Yeah, of course.
It was founded by a group of artists as the Buffalo Art Academy, actually. And the museum has grown from its foundation many years ago, and has a story of a number of extraordinary individuals who, at different moments in history, really enabled the museum to grow. So that's a typical history of many American museums that are often sort of grown through, private individuals really dedicating their collection or investments in growing institutions. So too, the Albright Knox Art Gallery has a very particular history. Albright and Knox are actually two individuals who enabled the building of the two historical buildings on campus. And the museum is now in 22 getting a new name, the AKG, Buffalo AKG Art Museum. And the G stands for Gundlar, which is the individual who has made the new building possible.
And what's your role in this initiative?
I am the inaugural curator of the Nordic Art and Culture Initiative, which means that I will be the first one sort of to make my mark on this curatorial focus. So right now I am laying the foundation for what is to come. So that's developing a program of exhibitions. That's a strategy for how to acquire work, how to grow the collection. And as such, all the programs that the museum undertaking, from public programs, commissions, public work, lectures, publications, etc. So all that I'm sort of developing with a particular lens in mind.
And so this initiative is specifically focused on the Nordic region. And is there anything, in your opinion, that defines this the art that is produced within the Nordic countries or the Nordic region? Is there like a particular kind of theme or something that is recognizable as Nordic, in your opinion?
I want to say no. I guess first of all, maybe to make clear, at least sort of my interest and the outset, is not necessarily to define something that's particularly Nordic. I think looking at especially a younger generation of artists and their practices, what strikes me the most is how very fluently they are in conversation with everything else, everywhere else. And sometimes I do think it's a disservice to try and label something as particularly Swedish or particularly Icelandic. Or I mean, that said, all works and all artists are also departing in the place that they live, the things that they encounter, what they see when they walk down the street. But that can be said about artists anywhere. So of course, this place is also a place of production, and that does enter artistic practice as well. So maybe that's a way of thinking about something particular to this place, but I'm not necessarily sure that that's the most interesting to describe, like how something reflects specifically Swedish street or brand or word or something like that. But I guess what also is my interest is really to bring something from this part of the world to the US, and not necessarily under a Nordic banner. I know that we are saying Nordic Art and Culture Initiative, and many times here in this part of the world, there's a great emphasis on sort of let's say national export of culture. Whether that's film or food, or we have sort of great support systems and states that are eager to show artistic production and cultural production from this region around the world, and that often is under the banner of Danish Design Now or Swedish, whatever. And I think within a contemporary field, at least on how I'm looking, I do think that that's not necessarily the route to go in this case. This is really more about looking at artists and works and seeing how somebody is doing something that is worth highlighting at this moment. And this is also, of course, developed for maybe primarily for a North American audience. For whom it might not necessarily mean so much that somebody is from Stockholm. What means something is the work that they do and whether that's relevant and urgent and pertinent and interesting to look at.
I think maybe there's also a difference because I think maybe from an outside point of view, it's easy to lump the Nordic countries together. But I would say that from an inside point of view, there is a clear distinction between Danish culture and Swedish culture, for example, which is clearly noticeable to those living in Scandinavia. But sometimes when abroad, it's easy to lose sight of those distinctions.
Yeah, I do think, and I think I don't have any one answer to what Nordic contemporary art is. I think that should also be scrutinized and problematized and thought about sort of critically, in the sense of it's not artistic production from all the happy, tall and blonde, blue-eyed people who walk around. Here, I do think that these art scenes are much more diverse. One of the qualities of these scenes, however small they are, like there's quite a number of international artists living in this region or coming through or showing work here. There's academies who for many years have been very open and offered young students from around the world to come here and study and do their BFAs and MFAs. And many of those artists, or some of them, have stayed here and are really enriching this cultural landscape quite a lot. And I think that's very important to look at and recognize. I think by saying that, it's also to say that this initiative is certainly not looking at individuals who carry passports from any of these countries. It's very much to think about this region as a center of activity. Somebody has been here for any given amount of time, and artistic production has arisen from here, or artists elsewhere have looked here or done work that in in one of the other ways is relevant to consider in this context. So it's a very open definition in the sense that you go to the Whitney Museum of American Art, and that's an institution that constantly grapples with how to define what is American art. And if you look at the program of the Whitney, obviously you immediately see that artists from around the globe are showing there, and should be, because the work also is relevant to look at when you ask that question. And so with this initiative.
And I'm thinking that tension, or that way of investigating the boundaries or demarcation of what actually is Nordic, could also be part of the process and what you're displaying at the museum. That it's not just one answer, but actually it's a series of questions of belonging and of questioning matters of identity and representation, and that's something that is continuously happening and possible to unpack in a number of ways, so that it's not just one set of ways of thinking about what is Nordic art, but actually it's a series of questions.
Yeah, possibly. And I think so very much. And I do think within our field, I think it's also worth really, asking why to look, even like why to have a geographical focus. Like, in one hand, I think many could say that's no longer relevant, or that's no longer in a way justified to look through a geographical lens, because everything is so fluid. On the other hand, it is and continues to be sort of a very used mode of operation, both in terms of how we navigate, how we travel, how we talk about things, how exhibitions are made and come about and deal with sight, and et cetera, et cetera. But that's also worth really constantly interrogating as well. In some ways, I wish we could sort of launch the Nordic Art and Culture Initiative and then kind of delete Nordic, because because from there on, I think it really artworks and artists, and that's what's going to speak for the work done.
But now I'm very curious, because now you've outlined your philosophy on, or how you view this area, or this part of the art world in the Nordic countries. But how do you then translate this philosophy or this view into your more practical, hands-on curatorial work? How, for example, does your curatorial practice look like when you select the pieces that you want to showcase, for example?
Yeah. I guess maybe to say about myself, I'm somebody who professionally have grown up outside of this region. So I've been living in the US for more than a decade. So I've always, in a way, looked at artistic practice broad, like internationally, globally. I've never had, in a way, a Nordic focus. I do know a lot about this region because I'm from here. But that said, of course, a lot of my work now is also to really figure out where should we start, what to look at first. And I think a few things is guiding this effort, and a lot is really both the existing collection at the Albright Knox, which is one of the best collections in the world, and of course there is already a way that collection is growing, and there's already so many incredible works and artists and stories there that I do think is, at least for me, is a very important starting point. Because, of course, and all of those moments in time, let's just say the 60s until today, or even earlier, there's, of course, equivalently artists from this region that have done incredible work that might not be known in the US, work that is very, let's say, it's very much part of the conversation that the existing collection is already highlighting. And so this is a potential of growth in I guess, in a more historical sense. At the same time, there's also a program, there's a curatorial team there, of which I'm now part. And of course, we have an internal discussion, not about, so let's say, Nordic art, but really about global contemporary practice and what is worth highlighting and what is worth looking at this moment, which ideas are are popping up, which conversations do we need to sort of bring to our audiences. And so my work is very fluently a part of that. And of course there it's, again, I don't argue on the basis of anybody's nationality or, but really, looking at which conversations are also important in the US context right now, and how might there be artistic practices or voices from here or related to this region, or in one way or the other relevant here that could add to that discussion.
And do you have any examples of conversations that you have a particular interest in highlighting in this context?
I guess maybe just to say one example, but this is something that's very much, I guess, a research example that I'm looking into right now, which maybe also highlights a way of thinking. The Icelandic artist Steina was part of a couple's, Steina and Woody Vasulka. Her husband unfortunately passed away. They are sort of innovators of media art. They are founders of The Kitchen in New York City. They lived in Buffalo for a good part of their life. She's Icelandic, not somebody who's maybe particularly known in this region. In Iceland, yes, but outside, not really. There's an incredible body of work. She's 80 today, so still around. But there's somebody who really has worked very fluently between this part of the world and the US, and who is neither really fully known very much or recognized in a US context, and also not really in a Nordic context. So there is sort of, for me, a potential, something to dig into, and an exhibition to make, works to look at. Because, of course, what's important is that what we do is not in any way a repetition of what institutions have already done here or elsewhere, but really adding to, let's say, to an ongoing also perception of artists from this part of the world. Many artists that people don't necessarily know that well, but that deserves to be well known.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Helga, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come here and talk with us. And good luck with your future ventures.
Thank you so much.